Welcome back to a NCAA tournament edition of Podcast on the Brink. Indiana is going dancing for the first time since 2016, and to help us break down the upcoming matchup against Wyoming in the first four, also talk a little bit about the Big Ten tournament and how the Hoosiers have been playing as of late. Ryan Corazza of Inside the Hall is back with us on Podcast on the Brink. How you doing on this Monday morning following a selection show and the time change, Ryan?
Hey, I'm hanging in. I'm doing well.
So let's talk a little bit about the Big Ten tournament and how important it was for Indiana. Ultimately, they get in the field as one of the last four teams in, obviously playing in Dayton on Tuesday night. Kind of tells me that Indiana, what it accomplished in Indianapolis by beating Michigan and by beating Illinois, ultimately is what got them into the NCAA tournament. Ryan, just want to start big picture. You know, Indiana's down 17 in the second half against Michigan and is able to ultimately come back and win that game and then beat Illinois. I guess, how surprised were you at just how well the Hoosiers played after what we've seen over this past month and a half? Indiana, I think, started this season 16-5, looked like a surefire tournament team, and then kind of stumbled to the finish line of the regular season, and then really out of nowhere plays arguably two of its best games of the season in Indianapolis to ultimately secure its way back to the tournament.
It was certainly surprising, and I think doubly so after the start against Michigan, which was not great. You know, the first half, they did not play well, and they were down 17 with, about 12, 13 minutes to go in the second half, and really kind of turned the Jets on and had that miraculous comeback. But really over those, 2.5 games, I think they played in a way that I think a lot of the fan base and a lot of people that cover the team, I think thought they could play like that, right? I think that this has been a team that the defense has really carried all season, right? They've really been in the top, 18 to 23 or whatever on Ken Palm pretty much the whole year, or for last several months at least. And offensively, this team has just kind of struggled a bit to figure things out and to be dynamic and to be at the level that their defense is at, for sure. And they've struggled to close out games, right? And so I think with the Big Ten tournament, what they showed there is that sort of figuring out how to win at a high level in the Big Ten, right? Because that's really what's kept this team back this season, and stretching back a little bit into the Archie Miller era as well, is having, as Mike Woodson has said time after time about just them being competitive this season, but not getting over the hump, not having the magic pill to get them these victories. And they were able to play at a high enough level for 40 minutes on both ends of the floor to compete with, Michigan, a team that kind of seems to kind of barely get into the tournament here as well. Illinois, who I think is Big Ten co-champ, they're a great team. And then Iowa, who, is playing as well, I guess, as really anybody else in the country right now. And they won the tournament yesterday, and they were there save for that last minute heave from Bohannon that banked and went in. Offensively,
Indiana has looked better as of late. That's been one of the biggest knocks on this team all season. But you look at the numbers on Ken Palm on Indiana's performance during that 5-game losing streak where they lose to Illinois, lose to Northwestern, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Ohio State in succession. They don't go over a point per possession in any of those games. But now, in 6 of their last 7 games, they've scored over a point per possession. And really, the offense could have even been better over these last couple of games if they could make some perimeter shots. But I think one of the key adjustments that Mike Woodson made, obviously, was putting, Xavier Johnson and Trace Jackson Davis in these ball screens. Are you surprised that Indiana didn't try this, I guess, earlier in the season based on what you've seen, how successful it's been these last couple of games? And what what about this style of play do you think is sustainable moving forward as Indiana gets into the tournament, or are there further adjustments that are going to have to be made if the Hoosiers are to advance and win a couple games here in March Madness?
So in terms of the ball screens, I really feel like Xavier Johnson really has just sort of upped his level, upped his ability to not make mistakes and to kind of play within himself a little bit more. And I just think that earlier in the season, they didn't go to this as much because it wasn't really as efficient as it could or as it could be and as it is now. And I think a lot of times now in possessions, instead of the first option is, okay, we're going to kind of run that floppy set, get some guys out to the wing, pass it to the wing, pass it into TJD. Now it's let's run a ball screen first. If that doesn't work, then we're going to go to that post action. But to go back to what you were saying kind of about these two really different stretches that this team has had, right? So they were, that 5-game losing streak, but if you stretch back one game, when they actually beat Maryland, so they were 1-5 on that stretch from January 29th to February 21st, all those games under a point per possession, right? As you said there. And those 6 games under a point per possession, that happened once in the Archie Miller era, having 6 games in a row under a point per possession. So it was some pretty doldrum. It was the doldrums in terms of the offense here. And in those games, those 6 games, Xavier Johnson, he was averaging 10 points, 4.8 assists. He was shooting just 34% from the field and 34% on 2-point shots and 35.2% from 3-point range. Trayce Jackson-Davis during that stretch, averaging 16 points on 47.7% shooting from the field. Okay. Now we go to this 7-game stretch. It is true against Illinois. They scored 0.99 points per possession. So we'll round up there and we'll say in the last 7 games, they scored 1 point per possession or more. 4-3 in this stretch from February 24th to March 12th, which is from the second Maryland game to, the Iowa game on Saturday. So Xavier Johnson in this stretch is scoring 18.4 points per game. So he's scoring 8.5 more points a game. He's assisting. He's got 7.1 assists per game, which is about almost 2.5 more. He's shooting 47.3% on twos. And this is a crazy part. He's shooting 72% on 3-pointers, which includes like a 4-4 in one game, a 4-4 in one game, a 3-3 in one game, a 4-6 in one game, 1-1 in one of the games. So, I mean, it's not like he's shooting, basically 3 or 4 over the last 7 games. He's taking a good amount of 3-pointers and hitting him. Now, Trayce Jackson-Davis in this stretch of this 7 games of a point per possession or higher, scoring just a couple more points a game, 19.1 as opposed to 16 in that stretch. But he's shooting 65.5% from the field instead of 47.7% from the field. So that's almost 20% better shooting percentage from the floor. And I think, this kind of all ties into the ball screens and what Indiana was doing on offense during that stretch when they went 1-5 and what they're doing now in this 4-3 stretch. It started with just some more off-ball movement during if TJD was getting the ball down low and trying some different sets. I really think where the confidence in the ball screens came and where they were really able to execute at a high level was that second half against Purdue in Mackey. And I think there was a confidence gained by the both of them that they could go. I know Purdue's defense is not, that's kind of their downfall this year. But I think to do that in that environment on the road and to have it successful down the stretch and to not have that back to the basket, sort of everyone standing around or maybe even everyone moving a bit and being able to go to that and just get easier looks on the move for TJD was huge. And that really carried through the tournament. And I think that as that gained confidence and as Xavier Johnson really made some nice reads and Trayce Jackson-Davis and just kind of throwing all those lobs, that they both have kind of got more confident with that. And the easier looks means Trace Jackson Davis is shooting on a higher percentage. It means he seems to feel a little bit more comfortable using his right hand. It seems to mean that he's feeling a little bit more comfortable actually taking a jumper. So I think that's been the huge change in Indiana's offense, which more or less saved the season for him.
It's the most wonderful time of the year for college basketball fans, and our friends at Homefield have the world's most comfortable, premium licensed collegiate apparel to get you ready for all of the madness. Run by IU grads in Indianapolis, Homefield produces the most unique apparel designs available for fans of your favorite school. Over 120 different schools are available at Homefield, and more are being added each month. Our current favorites at Podcast on the Brink are the Never Daunted Crimson t-shirt with the IU Oval logo and the vintage Bison mascot hoodie. It's the most comfortable IU hoodie available anywhere. Podcast on the Brink listeners can save 15% off of your first purchase by using code BRINK15 during checkout at homefieldapparel.com. That's code BRINK15 for 15% off of your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. So big picture here, Indiana's back into the tournament. How important do you think it was just in general before we get into Wyoming and kind of what's ahead for Indiana? You know, I talked before the season and people ask me, how do you define a successful season for Mike Woodson in his first year? And just based on where this program has been, since 2016, 2 coaching changes, moving on from Tom Crean and Archie Miller's tenure not working out. For me, the baseline is just to get into the tournament. So where they were going into the Big Ten tournament to where they are now, regardless of whether in the they get to the round of 64, they're just in the first 4 for now. They have to win a game to get to that point. But to me, I think overall, regardless of the ups and downs of the regular season, to get to the tournament is a significant accomplishment for Mike Woodson, no matter how he did it. Do you kind of share that same point of view in terms of this being just overall viewed as a success for Mike Woodson to be able to come in and get to the tournament, something that Indiana hasn't done in the last 6 years?
I do. I agree. I think to sort of reestablish that baseline of just getting into the tournament, I think it's interesting sometimes, maybe the national perspective, people may think, the Indiana view is these fans are expecting a Final Fours every year and they're expecting to win Big Ten titles every year. And I really think that to start, I think fans are just sort of looking to reestablish getting into the NCAA tournament and maybe getting into the NCAA tournament with comfort. I think the with comfort didn't quite happen this year because they really kind of just got in by the skin of their teeth. But I mean, yeah, I think this was the baseline for the season. This was sort of like what needed to sort of be reestablished in Mike Woodson's first year. And it was a bit of a roundabout way to do it. It was maybe not, there were definitely some bumps along the way, but the bottom line is they're in the tournament. And I think that was really important and has really more or less satisfied some of the concerns.
So with Wyoming, I wrote something last night quickly just on some of their high level takeaways in terms of who they are and who they've played this season and some of their key players. But I know you've dug into some numbers and looked at them a little bit last night. It's always tough on these short turnarounds to really get a great sense of who a team is, particularly one when we're so hyper focused on the Big Ten all season, to have to go to a team not even from a power conference in Wyoming that we obviously don't get to see a lot through the course of the regular season. But Ryan, I know you've dug into these guys a little bit. Just at a high level, what do you see as maybe the primary challenges for Indiana going into this game, and what do you think the matchup looks like for the Hoosiers?
Well, first off, this is not going to be a cakewalk for Indiana. I think Wyoming has a very unique offense that features some things that Indiana really has not faced this year. And so on this quick turnaround, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. The interesting thing about this team is, stuff we were tweeting out last night and some of the research I did, they have used 29 like post-ups a game, which is like tops in the country. I think that's either ending in like a shot or an assist out of a post-up. And so I think initially you'd think, oh, okay, well they got maybe they got a couple big men, but the crazy thing about them is this Hunter Maldonado, who I think he's 50 or senior now, and everything runs through him. He's their point guard more or less. He posts up a ton. So it's not so much that they're using a big man. They're using their point guard a lot to post up. And if you watch some of the highlights, I know you put it in that piece last night, but it's really a lot of him getting the ball and just sort of isoing on one side and backing a guy down. And then similarly, this Graham Ike, 6'9" sophomore, that can step out a bit, but really does most of his damage down low. He can kind of drive in and score as well. A lefty that uses his quickness. They just both they get into the post a ton, and they have a super high usage rate. I think Ike right now is the 5th highest usage rate in the entire country, and Maldonado has the 45th. So a lot of their offense runs through those guys, really skilled players. They're both averaging just a touch under 20 points per game. Now, off of them, they don't shoot the three very well, but they do. It does seem like they do look for those on kickouts if they're digging down or doubling on Maldonado or Ike. And there's a Jake Jeffries does hit 40% from three. They have another guy, Brandon Wenzel, that's hitting 36% from three. But as a team, they're just shooting 33.0%, which is like 218th in the country. So that's kind of what I look at offensively. I think Maldonado at 6'7" as a point guard, like who do you throw on him? Xavier Johnson obviously has been a great defender of late, but he's given up some inches, and we know that he can be foul prone, and this might seem like a tough matchup for him in that way. So do you throw somebody else on him? We'll see what the staff does. And similarly with Ike, I think, it seems like a player that maybe Race Thompson might be more suited to guard potentially, and maybe again to keep those fouls off of TJD if this guy is getting the ball on so many possessions. But so I think those are kind of the matchups that Indiana will have to look at and see what they want to give up, if they want to double these guys, dig down, and how they're going to kind of work against two post players that are very dominant in this offense.
March can be a stressful time of year for college basketball fans. That's why I trust my friends at Cornbread Hemp, Kentucky's #1 rated CBD company with over 3,000 5-star reviews. Family owned and operated, Cornbread Hemp provides the highest quality, most potent USDA organic CBD products available with the highest legal level of THC. Not sure which product to choose? Start with their best-selling CBD gummies, made with USDA organic fruit and their signature flower-only hemp extract. Orders shipped directly from their farm in Kentucky, and best of all, Podcast on the Brink listeners get 30% off their first purchase with code HALL. Visit cornbreadhemp.com today and save 30% off of your first purchase with code HALL. Feels like it could be a big Trey Galloway game too, defensively against Maldonado, because he at least gives you a little bit more size. I don't necessarily see it being a great matchup for either Miller Kopp or Parker Stewart. So, and if you want to keep Xavier Johnson out of foul trouble, maybe you do throw Galloway there for some minutes. The other thing with a team like this, Wyoming, it's easy to kind of look at their Ken Palm number and their Sagarin number and say, this is a game that Indiana should win, or it looks like they haven't played the greatest of competition, but like Indiana, this is a program that has something to prove and hasn't been to the tournament, I don't think, since 2015. Their coach, it's his first appearance as a head coach in the NCAA tournament. And, they are looking at this just as Indiana, as a golden opportunity to go on national TV on the biggest stage and make a name for themselves. So I agree with you that from an Indiana perspective, this is definitely not a game where you can be looking ahead to St. Mary's and UCLA and what could potentially happen in Portland. If Indiana doesn't show up and play its A game, I think this is, a game where they're going to be really challenged and could potentially lose if they don't play up to their potential the way they played the last couple of games. Do you think it's an advantage for Indiana to actually have this quick turnaround and play Tuesday based on just how well they've been playing? One thing I kind of thought about last night when I saw that they were playing on Tuesday with really just Sunday and Monday off, maybe it helps them carry a little bit of that momentum from how well they were playing in Indianapolis, and without having to wait until Friday, this team can potentially kind of just go out and continue the way they were playing in Indianapolis. Do you think there's anything to that potentially? And what else maybe intrigues you about this opportunity to go ahead and get the first game out of the way and then potentially advance on and head west and play out in Portland?
Well, I would assume if they actually beat Iowa on Saturday that they probably would have been out of the first four. But I mean, can you imagine if they had made Sunday, whatever happened against Purdue, and then maybe they still, if they say they lost Purdue, beat Iowa, and the committee still thought maybe, I don't know, they were in the first four and they had to play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, that probably would have been a disadvantage, right? I don't know if there's anything to this quick turnaround. I suppose you can kind of make that argument and they can stay hot and all that. I think where the tricky part for this team comes is they, play 3 games in 3 days over Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the Big Ten tournament. Then they're going to play Tuesday night in Dayton. And if they win that game, they have to get out and play a game in Portland, Oregon in basically 2 days, right? So that I think is going to actually be where, if you want to ride sort of the hot streak, and I guess you could say them continuing to play games in quick succession could maybe be helpful. I think that is going to be very challenging. And again, you're not playing, it's not like you're going from playing, Michigan State to Minnesota, and you kind of know some of these programs and what they run, and there's a familiarity from years past or just from scouting them once this season. They're going to, if they win, they have to fly basically across the country and play a St. Mary's team that they're not going to have any familiarity with. So to me, that being in the first four, that is the challenge of this. And really, I kind of look at this Wyoming team as, because it's not going to just be an easy game, that this does sort of make it a harder road. They could win 2 games and they won't actually be in the Sweet 16 because of this first four, right? They're going to have to win 3 games to get there. So while there may be some advantages to being able to quick turnaround potentially, I think this setup here is going to cause a little bit more of a challenge than had they just otherwise been in this tournament, not in a first 4 game.
How surprised were you that Indiana went to the first 4 as opposed to just being in soundly in the round of 64? It sounds to me like, they were obviously, they got in based on their play in Indianapolis, but they were potentially penalized because of the number of Big Ten teams also in the field. I think, they could have played Notre Dame potentially and been an 11 seed, but the committee looked at the fact that they already played Notre Dame in the regular season. So they put Rutgers in that spot instead. But I agree with you that the logistics of it are very difficult if they do advance, because they play late on Tuesday night, and if they're able to win, I assume they would probably leave right then, charter a plane, go out to Portland, get there early in the morning on Wednesday, have Wednesday to kind of get ready, and then they'll play Thursday late afternoon Portland time, I think 4:20 in the afternoon. So that is definitely going to be a challenge. But just what did you think of how they were fit in? Really you can't complain if you're Indiana, because you had multiple opportunities throughout the season to win a couple more games, and then we're not talking about the situation. But I admittedly was a little bit surprised that they were put into this situation just based on what we saw with a lot of the bracketology over the weekend.
Yeah, I think once it got to the last region and it was, that LSU 6 seed versus that 11, thinking that was going to be Indiana. And I swear that it was held for that seemed to be revealed a little bit slower than some of the other teams that seemed to hang there for a bit. And then it was Iowa State. That I think that was sort of the last chance to get what was maybe predicted from a number of the bracketologists, them getting that 11 seed. You were sort of like, okay, well, where does this sort of leave them? Are they going to actually be completely out, which wasn't the case? But yeah, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they were pretty much not in this tournament heading into the Big Ten tournament and really had to play their way in. And so you can't really complain too much because this is just sort of where they're at. And look, I mean, every year with the selection committee, there's always quibbles. There's sort of always, this team seemed like they should have been here. I can't believe this team didn't make it because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, I know a lot of people were sort of comparing the Michigan resume to Indiana's and being like, how were they in? They were 10, right?
11. They're playing
11.
Colorado State in Indianapolis, which
yeah,
that's
not too far away.
A little bit. That's for Colorado. If you're Colorado State, you can't be thrilled about the fact that Michigan's getting a chance to play in a building that they just played in last week, and is basically going to be pretty advantageous from a crowd standpoint.
Yeah, and with Michigan's resume too, I think I did see yesterday that just being 3 games above 500 at 7-14, I think they're the first at-large team with a record that poor since Georgia in 2001. So it's been like 21 years since a team with that kind of record has gotten in, and again, they were not even in the first 4 here. So but again, then you could look and say, well, Indiana's non-conference strength of schedule was whatever in the 300s or around 300. Obviously, Michigan played a tougher schedule than that. Michigan beat Indiana head-to-head on Indiana's home court by a ton. I think Michigan, throughout the Big Ten season, I know they were definitely up and down, but there were some really good, quad one quality wins. So, you can kind of go back and forth and what did the committee really value this year versus maybe some other years, et cetera, et cetera. And so, it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, you can quibble kind of on the margins about some of this stuff, but ultimately Indiana was, they were not in position to be in this thing a week ago, less than a week ago. And so they got placed where they got placed, and now they gotta keep playing how they've been playing to kind of prove that, they belong and that they are a team of this caliber that can maybe win a few games, even if they kind of have to have an extra win to sort of get into that 64, field of 64.
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said too about being able to get a game under your belt. And then, if they do advance, whether it's Wyoming or Indiana advancing, they're already going to have a game in the tournament played when they go into that matchup on Thursday. And there is something to me to having that momentum and the comfort level. Obviously, you're traveling and it's a different venue, but I do kind of believe that you can, if you play really well, you can use that as a springboard to go into the round of 64. And we've seen it before. There's been teams from the first 4 that have won games in the tournament. UCLA last year goes all the way to the Final Four. So it's certainly possible to use this as a positive and be able to take some momentum and win some games. Ryan, before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you just on the Big Ten in general. You watched obviously the Big Ten tournament and saw, teams like Illinois and Iowa playing against Indiana, and you're familiar with all of the league. Just kind of going into the tournament, which teams do you feel, from a Big Ten perspective, have what it takes potentially to get to a Final Four? Do you trust Purdue? Do you look at their defense as being something that's going to hold them back? Do you like Iowa and what you saw out of them winning the Big Ten tournament? I think, as excited as they were to win the Big Ten tournament, I don't know if that lends itself to winning a lot of games in the NCAA tournament, because they just played 4 games in 4 days, and that takes its toll on you. Illinois is a team that that maybe I'm a little bit higher on now that they made an early exit in the Big Ten tournament. They played really well in the Big Ten tournament last year, and then they came out and lost in the second round of the tournament to Loyola Chicago. So as important as the conference tournament was for Indiana to make it into the tournament, I think for some of these teams that are seeded a little bit higher after the long Big Ten season and getting beat up for 2+ months and having just really a grinded out season as you get into February and you're just trying to get to the finish line of the tournament. I think having that little bit extra rest could be beneficial. I'm just curious, just what Big Ten team or two do you like the most going into this tournament?
Yeah, with Purdue, I just think, and this is proven out, I know over, I don't know how many years in the tournament, but if you're not top 20 offense and defense on Ken Palm, I think only 1 year has a team been a national champion that has not had those characteristics. I think they either had an offense or a defense outside of the top 20. So Purdue, I just feel like defensively that's going to hold them back. And, I really love Matt Painter. I think he's a great coach. He's like all class. And I'm just kind of continually impressed how he can sort of keep that offensive system humming with different players. But they just, and offensively to me, it's just, there's kind of just that swapping out sometimes where it's like, all right, this matchup isn't good for Edey. They're putting Williams in and kind of swapping them. And for as dynamic as Jaden Ivey can be, sometimes I just think he sort of gets himself into trouble, has some dumb turnovers, trying to, go coast to coast. Obviously, sometimes that works out very well for him. So I think they're a very good team. I think for a deep run or, to be the team out of the Big Ten because of their defense and sort of because of what I see their offense sometimes, I don't think I'd probably go with them. Honestly, before the bracket came out, I would say Illinois. But they have like Houston in the second round, and I think Houston was like number 4 on KenPom, and they got a 5 seed, and Illinois will have to play them next, which is tough. And then they got Arizona after that. I just think Illinois on both sides of the ball is just like super solid. Obviously, they have Coburn and 3-point shooters, and I just think their defenses they're really just tough, disciplined, kind of great defensive team as well. So I think on both sides of the ball, they have enough there to get past some teams, except, they got kind of a tougher bracket. And honestly, this Iowa team, I keep sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop almost with these guys, and they keep getting it done. I think, obviously they're doing enough on defense to kind of switching up their looks and to be more competent there than the Fran teams usually are. So I guess that's kind of another team to maybe look out for. And obviously Keegan Murray is man, he's, going to be probably a very good NBA player too, just so smooth and able to score with ease. And obviously they can really fill it up if they're behind in any of these games. I mean, obviously we saw that happen against Indiana on Saturday. So I don't know. I would say Illinois, except for their draw, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Iowa's offensive numbers in the Big Ten tournament, 1.53 points per possession against Northwestern, 1.24 against Rutgers, 1.19 against Indiana, which included them going 0.9 points per possession in the first half and 1.5 in the second half against the Big Ten's best defense. And then over 1.1 against Purdue. That's 4 straight games, 3 of them against tournament teams where they, on a neutral court, had no problem at all scoring. Their defense, as much as we joked over the years about Fran McCaffery's teams not defending well enough to win games in the tournament, and there are questions still to me about can Fran advance in the tournament. I don't think he's ever made the Sweet 16 as a head coach, which is a stat to remember when you're filling out your bracket. All that said, Iowa being a better team this season after losing Luka Garza and Joe Wieskamp to the NBA is one of the more impressive coaching jobs that I've seen. We talked a lot about Greg Gard being Big Ten Coach of the Year. I think, that's well deserved. They won the Big Ten. But what Fran McCaffery's done with this team is impressive. Keegan Murray is as good as any player in college basketball. He's not going to win National Player of the Year, but he should definitely be a first-team All-American. The addition of Tony Perkins into the starting lineup, he's an Indianapolis kid from Lawrence North. I think he's really changed some things just about how, with the way they play, gives them a little bit more offensively than Joe Toussaint did. And, the McCaffrey brothers play their roles very well. And then Chris Murray is bringing some offense off the bench. Now, I still have a problem trusting Iowa to go on a Final Four type run, but I could definitely see it happening based on the way they've played. Now, I do have concerns about obviously the four games that they just played and fatigue and all that, but they're playing as well as anybody. They're the highest ranked Big Ten team in Ken Pom. We like to talk about Purdue having this great offense and a so-so defense. Iowa's right behind them in Ken Pom's rankings offensively, I believe, and they're ahead of them defensively. So Iowa is impressive, and I think they have a chance to, to make some noise. The one thing, though, that I will say is we keep talking every year, when's the Big Ten going to win a national championship? I was actually there the last time the Big Ten did win a national championship. It was the year 2000. I was graduating high school that year, and it was Michigan State cutting down the nets in Indianapolis. Still have not had a champ since then. I don't think this is the year it's going to happen, despite all this high-tier talent in the league, the number of lottery picks. Ryan, just in terms of the overall quality of the league, getting 9 teams into the dance is a significant accomplishment, but it still just feels like overall there's not really that elite team that you can point to that you have a lot of confidence in saying this could be the team that ultimately wins it all.
Well, I agree, but I think, that's why you roll at the ball and see what happens in this tournament, right? Because again, the years that of late that you might have expected, like Illinois last year, I think was a team that that was your pick last year. That was kind of a sexy pick. They were great with Io there, and they got Loyola Chicago had their number, right? And so who knows, maybe this year, in a year where no one's expecting any Big Ten team to maybe make the Final Four or make the championship game, who knows, maybe Iowa slides all the way through somehow. You never know. It's March, and that's why we watch the games.
We will have it covered from every angle at Inside the Hall. Gracie Barra and Tyler Tashman are, as we speak, I think, getting ready to depart for Dayton. Beyond that, we'll see what happens if the Hoosiers win. They'll be going to Portland, and we will be back at some point with another episode of Podcast on the Brink, perhaps later this week, either recapping a win over Wyoming, maybe talking about the offseason. Who knows? It's that time of year where you win or go home, but we would like to encourage everybody to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show. Thanks, Ryan, again for joining us, and we'll be back again next week with another episode, or maybe later this week with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.